Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Midlothian East Hustings. A bit of housekeeping. The toilets, if they're necessary for you, are at the back, left and right. If there happens to be a fire, follow me through these doors. And that's about it, really. I can't think of anything else. Okay. This Hustings has been brought to you by S-Bank and New Battle Community Council in collaboration with Midlothian View, giving you the opportunity as the community to speak to prospective candidates. That's what a Hustings is all about. I'd just like to take a few seconds, not too much time, to just introduce you to community councils, specifically S-Bank and New Battle. We get involved in a review of various different areas on behalf of the community, being the police, planning, road traffic, and road safety, which we also do active travel, environment, and many other different areas that of concern to the community. We're always looking for new members. So this is a very small advert, but if you're interested in your community, then you can go on our website and we can give you more information. Thanks very much for your patience. Now then, I'm going to introduce you to our host for this evening. It's Malcolm McGregor, and I'll hand it over to you.
The mic is working? Is it working? On and off. Is that better? Perfect. Good. Well, listen, thank you everyone for coming along this evening to listen to these candidates answer some important questions. Before I ask the candidates to give a brief introduction as to why they're standing and who they're standing for, and it will be brief, let me set out what the plan of action is. There are a number of pre-submitted questions. The plan is for each candidate to have 2 minutes to respond to those questions. I have a timer. I will be watching how long each takes. Therefore, hopefully each candidate will be succinct and answer the question fully. Once we've asked all the candidates the question, I will then go to the floor to see if there's any questions from anyone attending here in connection with the question that has just been asked and hopefully responded to. And that is, in general terms, the format which will be adopted. It's 25 to 8, so we've got to keep a fairly tight ship if we're going to get through some of these questions that have been submitted. So before we begin that process, I'm just going to ask the candidates to introduce themselves, and I've said briefly from left to right, beginning with Anne.
Thank you for coming along to the Hustings. My name's Anne Montague. I do know a few people in the hall through Community Council, which I was on for a number of years. I was brought up in Midlothian. I was educated in Midlothian, and I'm pleased to call Midlothian my home. When I left school, I went to college, and then I took up training to become a nurse, and I was a nurse for many years until I decided to change my direction, and I established a bus company. At the same time, I was a partner in a garage, and at that time I became a mechanic, a qualified mechanic. So I went on to further exams, and Julian S. Valley College asked me if I would like to lecture at the college, which I did for many years. So that was me. I ended up after that I worked in the finance office. I kind of went sideways stepping into the finance office. For somebody that can't count, I don't know how that happened, but that was my story. My working career finished at the college when I came ill. So that's my story.
Thank you, Anne. And Peter? This is supposed to be green. Not green. I'm not sure I am. Can you hear me?
Green sabotage.
Yeah, folks, we have light and we have sound as well. Thank you all very much for coming here, and it's nice to see all the friends I've made over the last 5 years as councillor for this area and as a busy member of the community council or attendee there. My story is shortly after I got married, we came back to Scotland, and I particularly wanted to live in Midlothian as I'd enjoyed living in Roslin as a student. I did have a house there, and our kids went to school here, and I was rather concerned that our primary school was going to be closed down with, it seemed, very skimpy consultation. So I became interested in these issues. Thereafter, becoming the voluntary chairman of the audit committee, concerned that we might not be as tight with our finances as we would all like, and indeed that has turned out to be the case. And then I was elected and ultimately became provost about three and a half years ago. So I present myself for re-election.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming along. Good to see some friendly faces in the crowd and some faces from Community Council as well. My name is Stuart McKenzie. I'm currently your councillor in this ward. I was elected at a by-election about 13-14 months ago. Again, I'm Midlothian born and bred. The last time I came into this building was my kids' nativity play. My kids went to Kings Park, so very local. Why I became a councillor? When I was in my working life, I did a lot of work in organisations, which was just about going into an organisation and re-engineering them to be more efficient and effective. So I thought I could bring those skills to the council. I have to say I've thoroughly enjoyed being a councillor. I've met some great people. There's a lot of committed members in the community, people that do so much. I mean, and some of them are unsung heroes. So it's been an absolute, really good time. It's a really interesting job, actually. The council does so much for so many people. Hoping to ask you guys for re-election. I'd like to think I'm honest and hard-working. I take a real interest in a wide variety of things. And I like to think that I will work across party and will work well with officers to really deliver what you guys need.
Hello, I'm Brian Pottinger. I'm married to Michelle, who's sitting there at the back, very shy. But it's nearly 35 years coming up shortly. And she is a hard-working nurse, and so good that she managed to come out here tonight to support me. I was born and brought up in Mayfield, Mayfield Primary School, and went to Newball High School after that, and I did 6 years education there. My early career was in the construction industry, but I developed a flair for the voluntary sector and anti-poverty project work, particularly with the Midlothian Advice and Resource Centre, and we set up many projects and activities, and some of them are still flourishing today. I would say early days very much New Grange Community Councillor. I was all the offices there, including chair of New Grange Community Council, but I'm going back a few years now on that. I'm still working away hard on anti-poverty stuff and with an international recognised charity, and I just been a councillor as well for 3 terms. I've stood 4 times. I lost the last time, and that was going to be enough, you know. But I've came back because I feel like I'm maybe coming back into representing Mayfield more so as my home. It's where my father moved from Shetlands and set up a business originally working in the pits, but did set up a successful garage in the middle of Mayfield. And it's just it's a labour and cooperative ticket I'm standing on, because I've been a member of the Cooperative Party for a very long time as well. Thank you.
Hello there, I'm Bill Kerr-Smith. Like so many of the rest of us, I was born here, grew up here, got married, had my first family here, and then I went off and got a job overseas because there wasn't a way to make a living here. I spent time in the Middle East, I spent time in London, I last worked in Washington, DC, and I retired in 2012, just figuring it out. So now I'm retired. My daytime job is looking after my daughter and my 2 grandsons and managing the local S-Bank and New Battle Community Forum on Facebook with Susan Goldwire, who makes it all work while I'm idly typing away. But the reason I want to be a councillor is because I spent so long overseas and came back to a county that was so much changed, where so much of the opportunity that enabled me to do what I wanted had disappeared, where you can't any longer get a university education for free, where the apprenticeship job that I had with the post office, where I got paid to learn and train as an engineer, these things don't exist anymore. And it's astonishing to me that with so much increase in global wealth, that our national wealth can be so diminished. Now, all of this starts at the very base level. Councils are where you make the first changes. Councils are looked at as places where the nation passes judgment on the government in power. And I would like you to pass judgment on this government and elect me as a Green councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. There's one candidate who is not here this evening, and that is Jenny Marr, who is the Liberal Democrat candidate for this ward. She's unable to attend tonight, but in the interests of fairness, I'll just read out very quickly her background from her, I think, profile provided previously in the Midlothian View. Jenny Marr, with experience of working in the energy industry as well as for Marie Curie, Jenny understands the needs and challenges of both business and the third sector. As a member of the Scottish Climate Change Assembly Stewarding Group and Borders Rail Community Partnership, she is passionate about tackling climate change and working with local communities to do so. She pledges to work hard and deliver sustainable transport solutions from Midlothian. Originally from Selkirk, she lives in S-Bank with partner Andrew and dog Jasper. There we go. Right, now we've got those pleasantries out of the way. The first question, this is one that's been submitted by Margaret Elliott. Some local authorities have begun removing women's single-sex spaces and replacing them with mixed-sex ones. Do you support this, or will you protect single-sex services in your community? And can we begin this time with Bill, please?
I find this a very difficult question, and I think many of us do. That there are a number of issues around the Gender Recognition Act that are not fully developed and have not been thoroughly discussed. The use of single-sex spaces for mixed-sex use is one of them, and there are others like transgender people in sport and so on. So while I am absolutely in favour of equality for people who want to change their gender, I think we need to have a civilised and respectful discussion about the actual implications on the ground before decisions are made. At this time, I would not be supporting that.
Anne, can we come to you to answer that question, please?
Yeah, I very much go along with what Bill said. I think we need to have discussion about this instead of all the toxicity that's happening at the moment between groups. I think it does have to be discussed more fully before any decisions are made. I am all for equality, and I agree. I think we do need to keep single-sex spaces for women.
Okay, thank you. And next we will go to Peter.
Thank you. The Conservative Party, the only major party actually taking a stance on this, and we're all in favour of the protection of women and women's spaces, and that's at the same time as being completely libertarian and tolerant at all times of those who have an orientation that is not perhaps mainstream, but they're entitled to take that view of life. The act that's coming forward will reduce the period for self-determination of gender to 16, and that strikes me as a very dangerous intrusion with the delicate process of growing up. So I find that the question of male and female, if not divinely ordained, is something that is so basic to our social arrangements that I would not seek to go far down the path that's been indicated by the current Scottish Government.
Yes. A lot of people are complicating this issue, and they'll be overcomplicating it too much. Sex is a protected criteria under the Equalities Act, and they never discriminate against anybody just because of their gender, and particularly not discriminate against women. Make it feasible to not be discriminatory. But when you start thinking about single places, the first thing that came to my mind was single toilets, and we explained this a little bit further. Why do we have disabled toilets? And why do we have non-disabled toilets? Why do we not just have accessible toilets for everybody? So, that's not discriminating against anybody. It's making it a positive going forward thing. Yes, women have their own football teams and their own agendas where they can have shared facilities. Yeah, and yes, you have to protect that. Because it's be biased otherwise not to do so. And as a former college chairman, college champion they call me, and Midlothian council as a councillor, I do a lot of activity in inequalities.
Thanks very much for the question, Margaret. I suppose it's very much a question of our age. We're the first generation who have really looked at these questions, and strangely I was discussing this with my daughter just on Tuesday night. Certainly from her generation, she looks at it and she says, Dad, why do we have these discriminatory practices? Wouldn't it be better if we just had all these toilets? And I was sort of trying to explain to her that, in a situation like that where we need to protect everyone in society, and yes, we all have rights, but we don't have unlimited rights. So the reason the toilet's there for, in her case, she's only 16, was that would any of us feel comfortable if someone had access to those toilets who potentially would do something that none of us would want to happen. So eventually she accepted that as an argument. It's not about discriminating against one group or another group, it's actually about providing protection for everybody. So I think with the current situation that we've got, yes, we've got historic buildings that have got male and female toilets. For me, they are likely to remain in place. Where new buildings are coming on stream, I think we will see a more pragmatic approach that there will probably be male-only toilets, there'll be female-only toilets, and then there'll be non-binary toilets, or as Brian said, there will just be something that's marked a toilet that anyone's free to use. And I hope that will be a practical solution, that everybody gets what they feel they need, and that nobody else feels that they have necessarily paid the price.
This issue of gender equality was quite emotive, and there was a number of questions asked, certainly online. I don't know if anyone attending here tonight has any questions they want to ask in connection with the question posed by Margaret Elliott. Yes, you have to speak up. Unfortunately, we don't have a roving mic. Oh, we do have a roving mic. Hold on.
Hi, it's not really a question, it's just, I think a lot of people don't understand that trans people are allowed already legally to access whichever toilet they feel suits their gender. Because we're all talking about, segregating toilets, but as the law stands at the moment, there's nothing to say that a transgender person or transgender woman can't use a women's toilet. So I think it is there's a lot of detail that a lot of people don't know about this, and I think as more people get to understand the whole situation, and I think we all do when it goes through Holyrood, we'll know exactly what we're talking about. I think there's a lot of people who don't understand the whole situation, and I think, yeah, that's really all I wanted to say. It was just a statement, really.
No, that's absolutely fine. Does anyone else have any other statements or questions you want to ask about this? And remember, we want to try and keep it, if you like, local in the context of these elections. I know there's a bigger picture and a bigger debate out there, but sorry.
Well, this may not be totally local, but I was a bit concerned. Somebody mentioned further consultation on the Gender Recognition Act, but when I went online to find out how to contribute to that consultation, I discovered it was closed and had closed in March. So I don't know how well informed people here have been about the fact that there was further consultation, and I certainly didn't feel I was given any opportunity to contribute to that consultation. Do the representatives of the panel have any comment on that?
Yes, Anne, thank you.
Yeah, I think you're right. You have to look for the information, and the consultations there have been consultations, but as the lady in the front there said, trans women, excuse me, do use female toilets, but at the moment there's non-binary. You have to really look into everything, but there's non-binary and there's fluid gender. So one day someone can go out and be a man, and the next day they can go out and be a woman. So there's a... All right, okay, sorry.
Yes, I think that it was about lack of consultation. And just on that point, does anyone else want to respond to that? Brian first.
Yeah, we're talking much more about the Scottish Government now, your consultation process. Yeah. In Midlothian, I was privileged at the opening of the brand new Laswood High School as a councillor. I looked at the toilets, right? I says, is that the boys or the girls? He says, well, what do you want? Yeah. There's a row of cubicles at one side, which generally the boys went to. There's a row of cubicles at the other side, which generally the girls went to. But everyone was a cubicle. You know, there was no urinals or anything like that. You know, and it was open. And you could walk by the corridor and look into the toilet, which the teacher says was great, because when there's bullying, that's where it usually takes place, is in the toilet. But when it's open like that, and all the sinks were in the middle, you know, and they came together to wash their hands in the middle of that toilet, and I thought, well, this is sort of forward looking. There's not really much problems with this. You know, you choose which side you want to go in, and you'll wash your hands again.
Yeah, I think the lady was asking about the lack of consultation, and I suppose, Bill, have you got any particular response to that?
Yeah, I just... I thought the consultation was running until the 16th of May. And I'm pretty sure that you'll find that there is still an opportunity to make your views known.
Okay, well, hopefully that helps.
I really don't know offhand, Mo. I'd love to be able to have all the snappy answers. One quick snappy answer, though, is I don't know why we got onto talking about toilets instead of single-sex spaces, because I mean, if you go to any outdoor event with all the portaloos, and I mean, there's no such thing as a male-female option there. When traveling in France the first time I went there, I was astonished, because I'd never been out of the country before, to find that the toilets were for anybody. I mean, that's just a red herring.
Okay, thank you. We've got one more question there from the lady.
Hi, well, I'm Margaret Elliott that put the question. So, and I appreciate people answering it, and I especially the kind of what seems to be the general consensus that more discussion needs to be had on these issues, and that I guess that's one of my main concerns, that it's been very difficult to discuss these things without kind of openly, without experiencing some sort of backlash. So I'm very pleased that that my question was put, and that you all felt able to answer. So thank you.
Well, I think the consensus seems to be there should be more discussion on that, but I do wonder whether that's perhaps a way of avoiding taking a side. I don't know. On a very emotive issue, perhaps it's not. But anyway, before we get embroiled further in that issue, we'll move on to the next question. And this is from Neil Stewart, who asks this. The impression we get is that increasingly councils are having to do more with less. Why is this, and what can be done about it? And if I could begin, please, with Peter.
Yeah, it's undoubtedly the case that councils have less. We used to get 34% of the Scottish budget in our head, something like 28%. There's just been a Fraser Anders survey which said, well, actually other parts of the Scottish government are being cut mainly because the money is pouring into health and pouring into education. In education, of course, the results have been poor and made worse by COVID, and we're falling down the rankings. In health, we've got records, A&E queues, obviously a very unsatisfactory position on cancer. But in terms of local government, the result of that is that we are, according to COSLA, 250 million short this year, and that will mean something like a £10 million deficit for Midlothian. Every year we have to balance our books. We did well this year, partly because of an accounting change that the Conservatives on the council had advocated, so that we can expense assets according to their natural life rather than according to some artificial formula. And that has spared us this year. The Conservative group actually said we should not have, in this year with so much personal pressure, we should not have an increase in council tax. We ended up with a compromise of 2.4%, but I can tell you the outlook for next year is looking pretty severe. The first 2 years was largely taken up with this council in having to cut back services. A lot of protected, so that means it's things like roads where the spending's gone down by 19%, it's things like parks, which are very important to me, which tend to take the brunt. Something has got to give at some point. And the other thing which I have to say, I'm interested to hear Bill's views on this, the need to be green is going to be very expensive indeed. Just to do up our council houses to the required passive house standard is going to cost 114 million. That's 2 years of the entire council tax income. We'll have projects such as Helene, which have gone up from 13 million to 24 million, largely to do with the need to use green techniques. So I am somewhat apprehensive of the future financially. We need to have more flexibility on our accounting rules. We've got plenty of cash, 130 million of cash at the moment, but the rules that are forced on us by, I have to say, by Kate Forbes and the SNP government do not give us flexibility over the spending of that money. For example, with cross-party support, including the SNP councillors, we said, hey, we do a pothole repair that lasts 10 years. Could we spend the cost over 10 years? Oh no, absolutely not. You must expense it straight away. So we don't get the quality of pothole repairs that we should have under modern fair value accounting rules. I continue to push on that. I realise accountancy can be very, very boring, but when it actually ends up a matter for your council tax bill, it becomes rather important.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, Stuart.
Thank you for that. Should we do more with less? Yes, I would say we should do more with less. Typically in the world of business, doing more with less is considered a good thing. So quite often when I see this question, it's framed as a negative thing. But actually, I would like to see my council tax be better used. One of the things I've observed, and I can only speak from my experience in my 14 months in the council, is that the political leadership does not have the ambition to actually do more with less. So they're comfortable to collect one of the top quartile council taxes in Scotland and produce services which, if you look at the figures, are at best an average set of services. So we should do more with less. Now, we'll probably will have a bun fight with regards to funding. Looking at the facts here in front of me, We do have a 6.6 million increase in funding this year, and that's 3.6%. I suppose as a supplemental question, people will say, what about the rate of inflation, etc.? There are definitely things there that are out with our control. So we really need a council that is on the balls of its feet, a council that's adaptable, it's resilient, things are simple and straightforward. That's the sort of council that I think that we should have in Midlothian. So I'm all for doing more with less, because we definitely, and there's probably cross-party support from a lot of the parties, we definitely don't want to simply see you guys as a limitless supply of funds. We can just infinitely, put your council tax up to supply services, at a sort of average level. So yes, we will be expecting people to do more for less. That actually is the SNP's ambition for this council, that we do more with less because we do things better.
I've never supported austerity. Austerity is a choice. The government chooses not to give councils enough money, chooses not to give the Scottish Parliament enough money, chooses not to have services throughout the United Kingdom. That's a choice that they make. They choose to have food banks. They've chosen to do nothing on this cost of living crisis that people are facing now, paying more and more for everything. They've chosen to do all that. There are choices. My choices would be different. My choices would get Midlothian fairer funding, get Midlothian the fastest growing council in Scotland just now. The number of developments that's happening here. We need to have an ambitious agenda, a radical agenda to take it forward and to deliver to the people what they need, not to be caught up in wee arguments about how come you got more money to fix potholes than I have, and challenge funding and begging for a few more pennies. Give the councils what they need and give them the proper budgets.
Peter's quite right to refer to the Fraser of Allender analysis that says that the Scottish Government is giving local authorities slightly less percentage of the budget than they used to. What he omits is that the Scottish Government is receiving about 40% less of the budget for local authorities that they used to get before the Tories came in. There has been an increasing and constant reduction in the budget provided from Westminster to all local authorities all over the country, and they all suffer mightily. Now, you can talk a lot about doing more with less, but there are limits to efficiency. No business can cut to the bone and cut to the bone, and the reason we have problems with so many of our services is because now there is absolutely no resilience. There is no scope for dealing with emergencies. Councils have done amazing things with the limited amount of money they have, but this is a problem that exists at both the national and the Scottish national level. And it's not enough to say that the Scottish Government isn't giving us enough. We've got to look at the fact that we are living through austerity 2, and austerity 1 didn't work. Austerity 2 isn't going to work either. I have to agree with Brian. Austerity is and was a choice.
And finally, Anne.
The Tory cost of living crisis is causing no ends of problem for councils all over Scotland. In Midlothian, the figures I see are 10.1 million to mitigate these Tory policies, including the bedroom tax. That works out at a cost of £236.88 per household. Midlothian is the fastest growing authority in Scotland, and to keep up with this, it's very difficult with less and less money coming in. As far as I can see, the Labour-led council have done nothing over the last few years. They've not got an economic development plan. They've ignored residents, they've closed schools, and they've done deals with the Tories and squandered money investing in the near bankrupt Croydon Council. So there has to be change. There has to be change within the local council. And that's why we'd like you to vote the SNP.
Okay, thank you, Anne. We're losing one or two already. Are there any questions following upon any of the candidates' answers from anyone in the audience? Yes.
Robin's coming.
Oh, thank you. Hello, I'm Lisa Beattie, and I'd like to ask the issue that Peter Smale made reference to passive housing and the adaptations that would be necessary for those council-owned properties to reach those standards. Is it not true that there is still an a housing revenue account that exists for repairs and adaptations in council properties, which is, last time I looked, very well funded and would, if properly managed and properly budgeted for in a proactive way, could actually be achieved over a period of time?
Okay, Peter? I'm glad you asked that question. The housing account is fully committed to building new houses, so the 114 million will be required on top. So we do require a better settlement from the Scottish Government. And when we go further up to Westminster, I mean, Scotland is receiving a record amount. We now have government expenditure of 99 billion in Scotland. 63 billion of that is raised by taxes locally. 36 billion is made up by the UK Treasury. And that's why you have £1.26 spending in Scotland by the state for every £1 that's spent in England. So I'm afraid I have to cordially disagree with many voices around here. The Conservatives have been solid supporters of the Union and solid supporters of Scotland. And that is why we are so concerned that when the money gets to the Scottish Government, it's diverted to projects like the disastrous ferries, like Prestwick Airport, like Methil, like the Kinloch Lever and Smelter. So this is a party that wants using levers to build our future. They can't build a country if you can't build a ferry. Scotland is getting a great deal out of the United Kingdom, and that's the one saviour we've had in this terrible COVID period.
Does anyone else want to ask another question following on from that? Does that, in fact, Niall Stewart, does that answer your question? Niall's over here.
Sorry, you're sitting laughing at Peter's answer, but as far as I know, he's quoting the numbers that are voluntarily collated and published by your SNP government. So.
Thanks, Robin. The quote there about getting additional money to local authorities doesn't include the commitments that were made by the Scottish Government that are delivered through local authorities. For example, 1140 hours, free childcare, free personal care for the elderly and vulnerable, play parks, free school meals, etc. All worthy policies I think most of us would like to see. One example is the introduction of 1140 hours childcare. There was a 28% shortfall in the funding from Scottish Government to Midlothian Council. So my question to the candidates, what will you do to make sure that Midlothian gets the fair deal that it deserves as the fastest growing community in Scotland?
Stuart. Thanks. Good to see you tonight, John. As sure as night falls day, every time I'm in a council meeting, it's mentioned that we're the fastest growing county. That's a good thing. Obviously, we have, that increases our rateable base, it increases the rents that we'll charge on social housing, it brings investment and jobs into the area. So if well managed, that should be a good thing. None of us would want to be the fastest declining county, for example. So what can we do, John? I mean, that last discussion very quickly moved off into, you know, Westminster versus Holyrood, etc., etc. And I think the original question, and then John's question, is really about what should the council administration do? So we're talking about the people who are your representatives who work with the chief executive and the board on the council. So really what we need is imagination and creativity to be brought. We need a council that looks at the art of the possible. You know, what can we do? We need a council that goes out and reaches out into the community, because you guys are a lot more imaginative than us sitting here at the top table, that says, this is what we need doing. Yeah, these are the services that work, these are the services that don't work. So what that looks like, John, in reality will depend on what the people ask for. But whatever it is, the council's going to have to adapt to the environment that it finds itself in. So it's an unpredictable global situation at the moment. Everybody in the room knows that. So what will future finance settlements look like? It could be significantly different again. Whatever it looks like, though, is we need a council that's adaptable, it's got simple processes, it meets your guys' needs. So what we bring, John, is we bring the creativity of everyone in the room by reaching out to community groups, and then we ensure that the plans that we put in place are seen through. And some of that sometimes is challenging, and the council might need to kill a few sacred cows to make the changes. But again, the council at the moment isn't ambitious enough to meet those challenges at the moment. So that's what I would like to think I would bring.
I think, Bill, you want to...
Stuart says that being the fastest growing county is a good thing. No, it's not. The amount of growth we're suffering is not being matched by investment in the infrastructure and the services that's necessary to look after the people here. So growth could be a good thing, but only when it's properly matched with the investment that's needed to take care of that growth. He also said, though, that we hadn't addressed the issue of what could we do about it. I mean, one of the big problems is that the way that local authority financing is allocated is determined essentially at the COSLA level. And the amount of money that comes to Midlothian is not proportionate to the growth or the population anymore. So the increases that Midlothian gets now from the deliberations at COSLA are not in any way matching the level of growth that we face. So something needs to be done at COSLA. The Scottish Government could influence that. They always claim their hands off, but that's not strictly true. They're limited in what they can do, but they could do some things. And our councillors can fight for a change in how COSLA allocates the cash that the Scottish Government devolves to local authorities, and they should.
Yeah, I've done 17 years in the council, 14 years in the council, finished in 2017. And all I've ever heard about is red tape, bureaucracy and cuts. Every single time, it's about how much you're going to cut, how much you're going to cut, how much you're going to cut, right? Nobody comes in with a positive agenda. How much do the workers need as a wage? Why do you keep thinking, how low can we go? You know, we've just seen this with P&O just now, you know, £3.94 an hour for the contracts for these agency workers. You know, we're not going to break this minimum wage because people would pay less if we had you get up to £10 an hour anyway, straight away. But councils want to be ambitious, you know, and they keep getting clawed back with this red tape and bureaucracy and the lack of resources. But when you talk about a Midlothian energy company, this is happening now, you know, more sustainable green transport. You know, why not get the trams out to Midlothian as well, you know, and get proper connection rates and use the resources to do this, to build the infrastructure that we need. S-Bank roundabout is getting clogged up. Tesco's roundabout's clogged up. You can hardly get out of Bonnyrigg at 8 o'clock in the morning now for all the congestion on the roads. You know, we can't get to see a doctor. We can't get to see a pharmacist now. There's lack of services everywhere. Yes, because we're a growing economy, it doesn't mean we blame that on further cuts, because we need the more services for people living here as well. We need them in our communities, and it's no point getting sent from one pharmacy to another pharmacy to another pharmacy to just try and pick up your prescription, because some people can't do that. They don't have cars. You know, they can't move about like that. And we need to do more to protect the vulnerable in our society and help the older people as well.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're beginning to cover a whole gamut of topics at the moment. Are there any other questions following on Niall's original question, which was about councils having less to do? Yes, please.
Yes, if the Conservative government is looking at those that don't have very much and asking them to do more with their money that they have, why can't they expect our council to be as imaginative and asking them to do more with what they have? And also, the Labour administration have been in administration, apart from 5 years, for generations. So our bad roads, our bad infrastructure hasn't just happened overnight. So how can we account for now asking, why is our infrastructure so bad?
Because we've not got resources.
Anyone? Yes, Anne's going to respond to that.
It wasn't just to that particular question, but listening to Peter, it sounds like Westminster's throwing money at Scotland, which is not the case. Scotland will receive only £212 million, which is £337 million short of the £549 million estimated to be an appropriate replacement for EU structural funds. This will leave the community, the third sector and communities short of money, because if the money's not coming in, it will leave them short for increased poverty.
In the broad understanding of things, that's not going to be the case, because there is the Levelling Up Fund, and we're encouraging Scottish local authorities to go for that, and that will more than compensate for the reduction in the terribly bureaucratic European Union funds that took up a lot of our administrative staff. So again, I come back to the Union is producing a huge dividend for Scotland, and as a result of the furlough scheme, we were able to keep businesses going.
Peter, I'm conscious this is a local
sure.
council election, Hustings, so I think we want to keep it S-Bank, as they say. All right. Oh, Ward 3, sorry, that's my apologies. You're quite right to correct me. Ward 5, I think it is, so I'll correct you. There you go. Touché. Yeah, there was a question put there. I think so. The question was about, I think, about infrastructure and about the existing Labour council. Is that a fair interpretation? Well, in those circumstances, I think it's only fair that we ask Brian to respond to that.
I'm not an existing Labour councillor. I'm a previous Labour councillor, you know. So I'm not. I'm standing this ward for the first time ever. But I can see the needs in this ward. I can see the needs for the new Kings Park Primary School, and I know that's scheduled and it's happening. You know, was it 14 million kind of investment there? I can see the needs for many other projects, and I think Mayfield Town Centre needs quite a good bit of investment. You know, to replace where the former leisure centre was, and you need more all the time. But I'm sorry, if I do diverge into a national issue, why is there no windfall tax on the big energy companies? Why is there no money coming into this company? What country? Why are we allowing so many people to avoid paying tax? You know, why you know, just so much money is available, you know, but it's not coming down to local governments, and we have to beg to get money to fix potholes.
I think there appears to be a more general issue concerning infrastructure and provision of services in S-Bank. I think this is, and the Ward 5, sorry. So that's, I think, really what we're discussing here, and I think probably what everyone wants to know is, what is your solution to the problem of the congested roads, the potholed roads, the lack of pharmacies, the lack of GP services? Who's got an answer?
Shall I have a shot?
I'm willing to make a comment.
This
Peter
is
first.
actually cross-party agreement on pharmacies as a result of what happened in Roswell when the big pharmacies blocked the opening of a new one. So I think that's one thing we can agree on tonight. In terms of infrastructure, I mean, we have this city deal of 1.5 billion across Scotland. And of course, one of the major things there is the Sheriff Hall flyover, which has been blocked by the combination of the Greens and the SNP. But we desperately need that to free up capacity on the city bypass. That leads back to a much wider question that the SNP are anti-car. And what you will have picked up is that if you commuted to Edinburgh, you're going to have to pay a toll because the SNP councillors in Edinburgh want you to stay in Midlothian, even though the number of commuters coming from Midlothian actually is not a very high percentage of the total number of car movements in Edinburgh. So the SNP will have you paying a parking levy through your employer, and they will have a toll for going into Edinburgh. And if you've got an old car, which people in modest means sometimes do, you will be banned because of the emissions zone legislation.
Sorry to interrupt again, Peter, but I think it was about infrastructure and what the solutions are, and we're already
this is about
off
roads,
to Edinburgh.
This is the roads infrastructure, and these are really big changes. They're going to affect S-Bank very much as its traditional position as a commuting area for Edinburgh.
All interesting discussions, but I'm not sure any of it leads to solutions, unfortunately. So let's bring it back to the issues. So somebody asked about potholes. So in West Lothian, they have got much more advanced machinery than Midlothian has. And in East Lothian, they've got much more advanced machinery than Midlothian has. So the question about how do we fix things usually comes back to how ambitious is your council? So that would be people like us. So are we out there finding out about more advanced machinery? And this is dull as dishwater, guys, but there's... Yes, we are. We should be. Beg your pardon? Yes. So there's some machinery that will lay 12 tons of tar, I am told by the shift manager who does that sort of thing. They use a piece of machinery that lifts something like 2 tons of tar. So where is the strategic roads plan? And when I use the roads around here, I mean, if I stand at S-Bank, and Peter would say we're anti-car, if I stand at S-Bank toll or people, I mean, I used to bring my kids to Kings Park, so I know what it's like crossing these roads. Who says that we should have more cars in Dalkeith Town Centre and in S-Bank Town Centre? Yeah. So I'm sure that people were pleased to see the SNP administration in Edinburgh actually trying to tackle something, because their car usage in Edinburgh must be worse than ours. Yeah. So they're looking at solutions. Now, we can approach that in a couple of ways. We can automatically just try and say it's jump, let's say it's a bad thing. But that's not answering your guys' questions. So let's say that they do change that. That's out with our control. So what we need is a council that's actually going to work with them to try and get some services brought back into Midlothian and try and get the benefits brought back into Midlothian. So in terms of the other councils that work around about us, again, when I go out and I travel into those areas and I speak to people, I generally find that I seem to think they're doing things better. And the question for me is always, why is that the case? So in terms of the administration, has it gone off and asked the right questions and bought the right pieces of equipment? Does it have the right strategic plans? I would argue it doesn't.
Bill, I think you want to respond to this issue.
Yeah, I want to make some comments. I mean, I'm not a councillor. I haven't been responsible for these issues forever. But for the last 12 years, housing's been built all over Midlothian without the investment in the infrastructure. And the infrastructure isn't just roads. It's sewers. Why do we have the Esk in the state it's in? Colin, you've set up the Esk Rivers Improvement Group, thank goodness, so we're looking at it. But one simple solution has to be make development contingent on the appropriate infrastructure provision. And that means that you have to improve the sewage capacity as part of your development permission. You have to pay for the extra schools. You have to pay for additional doctor surgeries. And people talked about the pharmacy issue. I think in terms of pharmacies, the problems I've seen, I've got an annual prescription, so every couple of months I'm down at Lloyd's in Dalkeith for my prescription. Their problems are staff. They have endless amounts of people off ill or who've left. Most of the regulars I've seen since I first moved in here have gone, whether that's stress because they've had the COVID problems of dealing with irate customers and long hours of work and whatever. But these companies don't have the staff, let alone need more locations. You'd need to do a market survey to find out if you were justified in opening another pharmacy. Anyway.
Well, before we leave this topic, are there any further questions? Because I know infrastructure, GP services, etc., are obviously an important aspect of local life.
I was just wondering, do Midlothian Council do their own road repairs or do they subcontract them out? I mean, you were talking about, I was intrigued by the large pieces of machinery.
The answer is both. And the trend after the problems we had with the Fushi Bridge depot, where, and I can't say very much about it, where contracts were not properly managed, the trend is to have more in-house. I'm very concerned about that. I mean, Stuart and I have been working on a project where the council's own staff took 5 months to come up with a quote which turned out to be double what a private sector contractor could produce. And the leader of the Labour group, bless him, Derek Milligan, raised over a year ago a multi-100,000-pound negative variance in our maintenance services budget. I've been demanding a report month in, month out on that, and it has still not come forward. So I have a problem with sometimes our internal Labour resource not being able to perform it, partly because they're loaded with central overheads, partly because we pay everyone a full final salary pension scheme. But there is a question, an efficiency question, which Stuart raised, as to whether or not we get the best bang for our buck. And things like the new machinery for potholes are definitely the route we have to go to get better value out of our own workforce.
Just before we come off the topic of the infrastructure, with all the new house building up at East Bank, there's an incredible lack of public transport. There's not a bus from the Dundara estate into Dalkeith. You have young families, the pavements are a dreadful condition. There's bus stops. Twice since I've lived here, I've actually had to explain to somebody from the Premier Inn standing at the bus stop that they could wait till Christmas because there isn't actually a bus comes past there. And I just wonder what links the council and as councillors you would aim to have with the building companies that, when they're putting in bids for the land for these estates, is there any way that they can be asked to contribute towards the transport?
Yes, I think the question there is what influence can the council have over these developers to contribute to infrastructure, and in particular bus services?
The cart before the horse in Midlothian. You won't get people to stop using cars. I use my car all the time because it's very difficult for me to get where I want to get anywhere with public transport. It takes an hour to get into town from Short's garage because it goes into the park and ride and the hospital.
Yeah. So I think that's a basic question that probably people don't know the answer to. Do we ask developers to contribute to the infrastructure?
Well, yes, we can ask them to pay for bus services for a short period, up to about 5 years. That has been done in the past, but we need more flexibility to get better deals out of the house builders. At the moment, if you ask for more than, say, £25,000, which is almost the tops for Scotland, beyond that, they go to a reporter and appeal our demands, and then we don't get anything. So we need more flexibility to get that. We need things like flexibility that if somebody does a development without planning permission, retrospective planning permission should have double the fees that the basic planning permission has. There are lots of ways we can help there. We did have, as all councillors had, a meeting with Lothian buses, and there are very long faces there. They are not back to anything like the demand they have, and of course the last bum on the seat is pure profit to them, but they've been losing money ever since the COVID outbreak. So they were very guarded about new bus services, and we think we need to look at things like demand, transport on demand using clever software so that we can actually have particularly in rural areas, bringing up and having a bus service. But I don't, in the short term, to be candidly honest, it's very difficult to see the buses being able to afford to create new services. We do subsidise the 51, we do subsidise the 95, but again, we haven't got much spare cash to do more of that. So hanging on to what we've got is the big priority. Back to the Edinburgh situation, they want to have this congestion charge.
No, Peter, that's the next question, so if you could just pop the mic down for a moment.
The implication is that people in Midlothian actually find it very difficult to shift to buses because we're at the periphery, there are fewer bus services than there are in Edinburgh. It's actually Edinburgh that can solve its own problem.
Okay. While we're on the subject of transport, a question from Sandy Howden is, I would like to know what all the candidates think about SNP Edinburgh putting a surcharge on Midlothian residents only when entering Edinburgh at the city boundary. Can we begin with Anne?
I actually wanted, I was waving to you, but I didn't get your attention for the last infrastructure question. And it's just to say that, you know, part of the community council, I was dealing with planning, you know, and looking into planning. Now they're building houses in places where there's no bus service, like the lady says. Rosalind Lee's an example, the hospital. They're wanting to build 300 houses up there. They've got planning. There was a Section 75, and the Section 75 details how much is spent on infrastructure, education. It details what it is. They got their plan. They said they were going to put on a bus. They were going to supply a bus, and then all of a sudden, they got their planning, and that was off the cards. Now that was Midlothian Council. That was Midlothian Council that made that decision. Now I hear Peter talking about flexibility. We need flexibility. Well, you know, when you're letting developers get away with things like that, I'm sorry, but you've got the flexibility there.
Okay.
And as for your next question.
Yes, the next question is about the city boundary and the Edinburgh putting a surcharge on Midlothian residents entering the city boundary.
The whole.
Yeah. This was turned down, as you'll recall, in 2005.
I think we're asking Anne that question.
Yes, I think it was Labour muted it a few years ago, a congestion charge, but now, of course, SNP Council in Edinburgh. Midlothian are in discussion with them about this charge, so it's, although we can see why the need to keep cars off the roads and encourage people onto buses, we can see that, but how do you do it? Well, the Scottish Government has now given youngsters free bus passes. Now, hopefully that will encourage more use of the buses rather than the kids going away and getting cars and another generation of cars. If the buses...
And I think the question, I'm not Sandy Howden, but I think what he's asking is, what do you think of that plan? Do you think it's a good idea or a bad idea?
Yes and no. I have to say that. I do have to say that.
We'll go to Bill, please.
I think at the moment it's not a plan. It's a proposal. It appears to be that they want to implement this system by edict without any consultation with people and without telling us what other actions they would take at the same time to mitigate the inconvenience and the cost. I mean, what would we say if the proposal actually included something like, anytime you got charged the congestion charge, we give you a free bus pass for a family of 4 anywhere within Midlothian, Edinburgh City District or Midlothian. I mean, would that make it different? If they said, okay, we'll put in a free tram service from the boundary to the centre of Edinburgh, Would that make it different? Until you hear the full scope of a proposal, you can't just jump on it and say, that is rubbish. Congestion charges are applied other places, and they're applied for good reasons. This may be one of them, I don't know. And until we've had the consultation, I won't know. And until I've seen the proposal from Labour in the SNP in Edinburgh, none of us will know. So it's impossible to come down on one side or another at this point.
Thanks. I think the last two candidates have rather stolen my answer. The answer at the moment for me is maybe. Right? So we all love the convenience of cars. We do. I mean, I drive a lot myself. Yeah. However, we need to have balance in society now, don't we? So again, if you stand at S-Bank Toll and watch the wee kids trying to cross the road, it's a shocking level of traffic, and the paths are narrow in Midlothian. So we have to recognise there is an issue. If there's an issue here, I guarantee that, I mean, I used to commute into Edinburgh as well. I mean, the issue is worse. So they want to do something about it. We can't blame them for that. You know, they're our next door neighbours and they want to change their house. They may do that, they may not. Bill's absolutely right. It's a proposal. We have some details. We think it's going to be about £2 a day, so much the same as a bus fare. And well, you can come in.
Why not?
Well, as Bill said, it's a proposal, so we asked questions, which... Yep. Yeah. So we asked questions and to say, you know, what do we think it's going to be, etc. So, no, we asked them because that's what a good administration of Midlothian should do. That's their proposal. So until we get more details on how the proposal will work, it will feel emotional and it will feel like we're maybe losing out. But Bill's right, at the moment, it's a proposal that we don't know the full details of. I say it's a maybe, and Anne said yes and no.
I think the candidate's expressing a view about the question, and I'm going to go to Peter next. Are you in the maybe his eyes or maybe his nose camp?
Well, we do know a great deal about this because of what happened in 2005. Midlothian was not given a vote. Only Edinburgh was given a vote. And this new proposal will apply to every part of Edinburgh, including South Queensferry. But Midlothian went to court on this, and it said it was very unfair because if you take a place like Dander Hall is actually far closer to the centre of Edinburgh. So anyone in Dander Hall going back and forward will be paying presumably £2 or £3 every time they cross the boundary. Meanwhile, Edinburgh people will be privileged so they can leave, and indeed 47,000 a day commute from Edinburgh outwards, and they will not have to pay at all. So it is hugely discriminatory, very unfair, it's going to be quite undemocratic, and it will harm the economic viability of Midlothian and bureaucratise our lives.
Thank you.
That's correct.
Excellent. And Brian, can you respond to the question? Do you think it's what do you think about the surcharge?
I think it's bad. Obviously, we can all run around and complicate it and say, is it the consultation, then we'll need more information and everything else, but I just think, you know, my first gut reaction, it's a bad proposal. You know, I'd rather hear a proposal to fix Sheriff Hall roundabout, you know, lane separation. I'd rather hear a proposal to get more trams out of this area to give us better transport links, and I'd rather see more investment in our not-for-profit bus companies.
Are there any other questions anyone wants to put? This lady first.
just wonder if this isn't an actual opportunity for Midlothian to get more industries and more jobs in Midlothian, that if it becomes so expensive to have businesses in Edinburgh, they'll have to look for elsewhere. So is this an actual opportunity that we're not looking at properly?
Does anyone see this, the surcharge as a potential opportunity and want to respond to the lady?
It strikes
I
me
think
kind of like the argument that was put that by having a border between England and Scotland, you'd be providing jobs for the people looking after the border. It will dislocate our relationship to Edinburgh as an academic centre and an administrative centre. Having said that, I do accept that we should have more balance in planning in Midlothian. We're always giving planning for houses and very rarely for businesses. There's a new planning framework, National Planning Directive 4, which says, isn't business, small business, wonderful? But it then goes on to list 23 reasons why you can object to a business setting up in any part of the county, partly because it's not consistent with existing businesses. Well, as I mentioned at the council, you'd have never had the Hill End ski slope if you took that sort of line. So the Scottish Government is pro-business on the surface, but in practice, we have less entrepreneurship in Midlothian than we need in order to sustain a healthy balance.
Right, okay, I think we went slightly off piste there, but under reference to Hill End. But
Bill, the only view I have is that the time difference between developing business opportunities and the likely implementation of any scheme would be pretty long. So I doubt that it's going to be a very quick solution if there is one.
I think I have another question at the back behind you.
Hi, candidates. I'm just thinking, if this charge came into existence, would it be fair and reasonable for Midlothian to tax the cars coming from Edinburgh into Midlothian? And would our candidates support that move as being fair and equitable and use that money for development of transport links? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that question. I wonder if it's easier just simply to have a show of hands. Would you be in favour of taxing Edinburgh folk heading out to Midlothian with a similar surcharge? And I'm asking the panel. In favour, hands? No.
Be careful what you wish for. The numbers in 2011 were 95,000 going inward into Edinburgh and 47,000 coming the other way.
Okay, we've got a little bit of time left, so I'll come to a question now that's been posed by Jonathan Riddell. He asks, or he makes a point and then asks a question. He says, none of my councillors in Midlothian South have communicated any of their work for the last 5 years, and the Conservative councillor Kieran Munro stopped turning up to council meetings when I last checked. How will you communicate your work with your constituents? And can we begin with Brian?
I think my constituents previously knew me as a very good communicator of my work. I attended all the community councils in my area very regularly, and those included Gore Bridge, Newton Grange, Moorfoot Community Council, and I also attended them with a written report in my hand, you know, of relevant issues and community issues that was in the report, not just a council handout kind of list of what was happening. And planning can be a very complicated one, but something community councils are very interested in, different kind of planning issues, and it's so difficult now for a councillor to express their views on planning. Sorry, I'm running off on tangents here, but and another one I wanted to talk about, sorry, just thought about as well. When you talk about developer gain contributions, you know, councils didn't say to a developer, Dandara Homes, you've just built so many houses, give me a lot of money to resurface a road. You know, you actually have to say to them what the particular project is. And I've seen all that planning gain in the houses around about Gorebridge in the past going to the new Battle High School getting built, and that money's were ring fenced for a particular project. So just to let people know that. But I've always seen myself as a bridge. I'm not a councillor. You know, I'm a bridge of information from my constituents to the council, and from the council to my constituent, and nothing gave me more pleasure in actually solving some of these problems.
Thank you.
Anne, how will you communicate your work to your constituents?
Well, I'm very passionate about the community councils because I've spent many years on community councils, and it was very disappointing the number of councillors who came along to our community council meetings. Very disappointing. If I was elected as a community councillor, I would be attending community council meetings, because this is where you find out what's actually happening in your community, and that it's the constituents in your community who you're serving. So I can't see any other. I really feel it should be made compulsory that councillors attend community council meetings. That's what I feel should be, but I know I will attend community council meetings because I've seen too much the other way.
Okay, thank you. Bill, attendance and communication, how are you going to do it?
I think I'd like to follow the example of Peter and John, who were some of the most diligent councillors who ever, in my experience, served. They always attended, unless there was a reason not to, our community council meetings. So that's an obvious thing to do. I'd like to hold surgeries, as some of them did. I mean, I used to watch Peter as we held our community council meetings up at the college, and he'd be in that little lonely cafe area, hoping that somebody would turn up, and that's something he repeated in lots of places. I think that needs to be done. You may end up spending an hour and nobody turning up, but you have to make yourself available. And I'd like to do what Ian Baxter did, which is a regular newsletter to be delivered around the ward. Not quite sure how he financed that. I wonder if there's a council budget for it, but those are some of the things I'd do. Planning game.
Peter.
Yeah, I mean, Brian's right. It's actually very difficult for us to discuss with any of you any planning proposition, and these are very often the most emotive things and the most important things. There was, as many of you know, quite a run-in with councillors and the Standards Commission, but we did get a concession out of them that's quite important, which is that if a planning matter is raised in a community council, then the councillors can be involved, although we must never take a position for or against. So I do see the community council as continuing as very important. I think social media, we're perhaps rather wary that the slightest word that's not woke enough and you'll be in trouble, but that's going to be an increasing part of communicating with our constituents. Surgeries themselves, I think integrating them with the community council is quite a good thing. So if someone wants a private word either before or after, they're able to do that.
No, it's a great question. I'll give you a few examples where I think that in our ward you're actually quite lucky, because Peter, myself, John Hackett, we regularly attend all the community councils, so that's like Mayfield, Pathhead, etc. So that really works because they keep us right, so if we miss something they let us know about it. And we get some fantastic ideas coming up, so that's again, you guys are more imaginative than we are, so that's where we get some great ideas for what needs doing, and like Peter mentioned, the work that we've done on East Houses Park, etc. That comes through meeting with local groups. So in terms of communication, for me that's a fundamental. One thing to say about community councils is they're always looking for new members. Using the technology, I've got a weekly Facebook page which I started doing. Now that's because somebody asked me what a councillor does, and I thought, actually a lot of what the councils do is behind closed doors, and it's not that accessible. So weekly Facebook updates, just to say, we attended these meetings, licensing for example, or planning meetings, whatever was happening. So that's a useful forum. For some communities, I mean, I did some work up in Edgehead where I literally knocked every door in the village and spoke to just about everybody in the village, and that was to do with road safety. So there's no there's no shortcut for shoe leather, as the saying is. Just go out, knock on people's doors. I'm generally a really nosy person, so I like to knock on people's doors and ask them, what's going on, what needs fixed.
Okay, I think Jonathan Riddell's here. Does that answer the question? question that you raised?
Oh, Jonathan Riddell, is he here? I thought he was here. No, he's not here. I thought I got a text from Newfield saying he was here, but that was a dummy runner. Okay. Right, one last question very quickly. This is from Alan Burns. The Transport Act 2019 banned parking on the pavement. Do you have any plans to implement your own laws? Presumably about parking on the pavement. Bill?
I don't know if it would be a law, and it's certainly not about parking on pavements, but I require councillors to stand down if they weren't attending meetings instead of waiting 6 months and being able to turn out once. I think it should be a rule that councillors who don't attend for 3 meetings in a row are out, deselected.
Okay. The parking on the pavement, any views? Any?
Did you say me? So.
No, I'm just sorry, I passed it over to Stuart. Sorry.
All right, sorry.
So if, for instance, people are parked, illegally down in Dalkeith, obviously we do have the traffic wardens. There are some areas in Midlothian where there are long-standing habits of parking on the pavements due to specific issues. So as a council, do we have any plans at the moment, not that I'm currently aware of, but we always need to be careful when you're talking about, perhaps someone's got a space outside their own house where they've parked, it's just always been there, but technically it's pavement. So I don't know if the questioner's in the room, but you need to be very careful in how you approach that. So I don't think there's a blanket one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah, this situation is that the local authority does have some discretion in how they implement this legislation. It's very difficult for us in places like Path Head, where, just as Stuart said, many of the houses actually own the slot in which they park their car, but it's illegal for them to cross the pavement to get to it. And if you take some of the areas of the older schemes in, say, Bonnyrigg, if it wasn't for the fact that people park on the pavement, the emergency vehicles wouldn't be able to get through. And driving through Bonnyrigg at the moment is a huge challenge because of parked cars. So this is not easy to solve. And the idea that we can just find land for car parks, well, we'd rather have that land for social housing. This tension is not going to be easily solved by any form of legislation. So it's best, I think, we use local knowledge to find practical solutions, but there's no magic wand for this.
You just give me the power to make some laws, right? Okay, if you give me the power to make these laws, right, it would be a clamping offence to park in a disabled bay. If you're not a disabled driver, you're there, that's the blue badge. It would be enforceable on the insurance companies to go after you if you blocked the sight lines of an accident and you parked on the corner. I think they can do it partly now, but give them a lot more power to do that. Inconsiderate parking is a blight everywhere, and it's a pet hate of mine as such. Streets were only built for 4 cars per house or 3 cars per house. These streets were built a long time ago when they expected maybe 1 car for every 2 houses, kind of agenda. And our streets are clogged up with wall-to-wall metal. And you see it's even difficult for the emergency services to get up through some of these streets. There's so many other things. The number of vehicles that are parked on the highway. If you've got a commercial vehicle, like a big pickup truck or something like that, your boss should be saying to you, have you got a safe place to park that off-road, off-street? And I think that would be good, but I don't think that's a vote winner. I think, but it's just ideas of my head just now. It's so difficult to find appropriate parking places when there's that many cars on the roads just now.
Speaking as a disabled person who has been going round the streets on my buggy this last wee while through this campaign, I cannot tell you how many times I've had to reverse and go back away to the end of the street to get off the pavement to come along the road and back on the pavement because of selfish people parking on the pavement. And I don't accept what Peter said about not affording, I beg your pardon, I don't mean I don't accept it, but the reason being people are so lazy to walk the length of themselves, never mind to a car park, you know. So I am for legislation to punish drivers that are selfish, that park on pavements and in disabled bays.
Okay, excellent. We've got 4 minutes left. Over to the floor for any questions you want to ask these candidates on any topic that's local. Yes.
There's a microphone coming.
Thank you. A question was raised earlier about accountability of councillors and their communication with their constituents. In October last year, I wrote to all 3 of my councillors about asking them to support free local government, to support fossil-free, in other words, disinvestment of fossil-free activity from Midlothian pension funds. I'm still waiting for a response from the Labour councillor, and from the Tory councillor. I had a fairly, what appeared to be very sarcastic remark about Alex Salmond and his views on oil, which didn't answer my question. My question to all of the candidates is, if elected, would they pledge to commit to communicate with their constituents when they raise issues of concern? Would they commit to responding with integrity, sincerity, and respect?
Let's run down the line
with that. I can use this one. I think you can imagine what a Green candidate would say. Yes, I'll support what you're saying.
I was amazed when Daniel Rowley was quite proud to see what she was the most effective communicator of all the MPs. She was in the top 10, I think it was, in the UK for responding, and that's great that she did that. But I think that's right. You do that. You do respond to your constituents. And the other thing is about, it's not just going to community council meetings. You are a community activist. You're out there in the community. You're meeting people at all different events and functions, and I will be meeting folk in my voluntary work on a Saturday morning again very shortly, when we're handing out surplus food stuff to people. And when you're doing that kind of stuff, you're an ambassador for the council as well, and you can actually and you're communicating with people there and then. And I'm not ignoring anybody when I see them on the street.
I was actually quite surprised to find that a lot of councillors don't respond to constituents. I've taken it for read that you would. If someone's taken the time and trouble to write to their democratic representative, you would expect that they would respond. Do we get it right all the time? No, sometimes we miss. You might miss an email, but it should be the norm. So yes, I think in all instances you should expect at least a response. It should be to the point. It should be trying to deal with the issue that you have, and of course it should be polite, and sarcasm or personal points have got no part in there, because as a councillor you're there to do a job, so you just do the job. So yeah, absolutely. And on the pollution front, which I think was the thing that you'd raised about air quality, yes, the pension funds are invested in big oil companies at the moment. You could take the view that as more and more electrical power comes on, and that's obviously a free, and China's done huge investments in electrical power, so I think they've already sniffed what way the wind's going. So from an economic benefit as well, yes, the energy sector should be looked at from the pensions.
Peter, on the general point of responding with sincerity, I don't really want to get into specifics, tete-a-tetes between individuals.
Lisa, you've been in public office. You've got a thick skin, and you know that in the 2014 referendum, Alex Salmond promised every Scot would have thousands of pounds as a result of the oil industry. So your party has radically changed its position, and it's now actually bleeding the northeast oil industry by its antipathy to further development of local energy resource, which will spare us the problems of dealing on world markets. Goodness knows that's important at the moment. And also the oil that we produce from the North Sea is not nearly as polluting as the sort of energy we'd have to import if we didn't have that industry. It has to be managed. I don't think it should expand forever. I think it will be managed down in the end. But for the Scottish National Party to abandon the oil industry that was the basis of the 2014 manifesto is a problem for you politically you must face up to and explain to the electorate. I stand by my position.
I think the question was, ultimately, would you commit to responding with sincerity, etc., in the future?
I was very sincere in what I said. I'm sorry if you felt it was sarcastic. I thought it was very much to the point.
And Anne?
Yes, I agree that if you're responding, if you're a councillor and you respond to an email or a letter you've received from a constituent, it should be to the point, it should be polite, and it you know, and no sarcasm within it. That's really all I've got to say about that.
Okay, it's now 9:02, and with no hint of sarcasm, I think we can safely say we've come to an end, and we're grateful for that. Listen, thank you to everyone for attending tonight and listening to the candidates and asking them some insightful questions. And I would just like you to thank the candidates, or take this opportunity to thank the candidates for turning up tonight and responding. Thank you. You're now free to go.